Hello, everyone. Welcome to session two of our exclusive series on cracking the XAT. I'm Shivabrata Nayak, and I'm thrilled to have you here as we jump deeper into one of the most critical and unique sections of the exam. That's decision making. So, in today's session, we will be focusing on the strategies, Caselets, and solutions that will help us or help you to S or help you S these uh, sections with confidence. So, if you have ever felt stuck with while analyzing a decision making problem or wondered how to identify the best option among similar choices, so you are in the right place. So, what you can look forward to in this session is what the first one is called as understanding the mindset that are required for tackling decision making problems effectively. Second, exploring uh, real jet style caslets to help you familiarize yourself with the pattern. Then, third, I can say that what learning step by step strategies to eliminate traps and choose the most appropriate answer. And the fourth one, which I can point out, is called as uh, finally we solve some of the practice caslets, isn't it? So, caslets together and discuss solutions in details, isn't it? So, remember that if you have any kind of doubts or queries, feel free to use the comment section to share your answers or ask questions as we go along. So let's make this session interactive as well as engaging one. After all, the more you participate, the better you will learn, isn't it? So grab your notebooks and focus your mind because we are about to unlock the secrets of decision making in Jan. Let's get started with the first strategy, isn't it? So let me take you to the first one. One second. Well, so the first one, which is given here, is called as using a logical framework. That is an essential tool for systematic, what you can say that systematically assessing the option in a decision-making question. So, using a logical framework to evaluate decision-making question. So, as far as I have pointed, it's called as it is a logical framework, or sorry, what we can say that it is a systematically assessing the options in a decision-making question by evaluating each option against a well-defined criteria. So you can identify that the most balanced and effective solution, isn't it? Now, let's talk about that when we discuss this logical framework to evaluate a decision-making question, right? My thought is nothing but to provide you the elaborate guide on how to apply this framework in that decision-making questions. So when I talk about this logical framework to evaluate a decision-making question, so you can find out there are certain key criteria for assessment, right? So what are they actually? Okay. So what are those of the things? Like when we go for the key criteria for assessment, so the first thing is coming is nothing but called as a, you can say ethics, isn't it? The first one, which is known as a ethics, ethics. So when we talk about ethics, so the key consideration for this is nothing but does the solution align with ethical and moral principles? And if I talk about that, why it matters? When we say that ethical decision making, so we consider that what it builds trust, isn't it? It builds trust and it builds also credibility, right? It is a solution that must uphold fairness, right? Not only fairness, but also integrity and societal values, right? Now the next question come out or next question comes out is what? How to apply that? Remember, when we go for it, we need to check whether the solution involves a deception, bias, or harm to any stakeholders. Let's think of an example. The example is called as in a scenario, in a scenario or in a situation about laying off employees. That's what I told you in the last class. So, in a scenario about laying off employees, right? So that prioritize solutions that minimize unethical practices like abrupt termination without notices, right? So in that case, the that is the one of the thing which we look for in a ethical practice. The second one is called as a stakeholder impact. So when we talk about stakeholder impact, we can say that the key consideration in this is also what, like, does the solution address the concern of all relevant stakeholders? Second, is it necessary? Why it matters? Because ignoring stakeholders or ignoring stakeholders' interest can lead to dissatisfaction, resistance, or you can say that long-term issues, isn't it? Then how to apply that? When we find out the question, you need to look at what or list all affected stakeholders, right? So who could be the stakeholders? You can say that employees, customers, shareholders, or the community, right? So analyze how each option impacts their interest. Let's take the example in a business or in a business scenario that involves product recalls, then the solution must provide or protect consumer safety within the, you can say that within minimizing financial loss to the company, isn't it? The next, which we consider, is called as a practicality. The key consideration here is what? Is the solution possible or feasible in the given context? That's what we need to observe. And why it matters. A solution may be ethically sound and stakeholder friendly, but if it cannot be implemented, then what do you consider to it? It is ineffective. Then if we understand also how to apply that. We need to assess resource availability, that may be called as a, you can say, um, time, money, and manpower. Time, money, and manpower, isn't it? So, understand the constraint mentioned in the scenario. If I think of it, uh, taking an example where I can say that what uh, proposing a long-term investment in a cash-strapped company may be what impractical, isn't it? So when we talk about uh, using a logical framework to evaluate decision-making questions, so what are the things we need to focus? We need to focus, you can say that ethics, ethics. Second one is called as stakeholder impacts, stakeholder, stakeholder impacts, like this one. And third one is called as a practicality, right or not? Beside this also, you would find out the next one, which is called as a sustainability, right? So what do you mean by that sustainability? When we talk about sustainability, here also we need to focus key consideration, why it matters, and how to apply that. Like when we talk about sustainability and the key consideration of it, we need to say that does sustainability ensure long-term benefits and minimal negative impact? If that's so, then why it matters? Because sustainable solutions uh, prevent what? Prevent, you can say that recurrence of problems and contribute to overall stability, right? Then how to apply that then? We need to evaluate whether the solution resolves the root cause of the issue or just address the symptoms. Second is called as a consider environment also. Social, you can say that consider what? Environment or environmental, socio, and financial sustainability. Let's take the example here. We can say that in an environmental scenario, we can talk about that favor solutions that minimize ecological damage while achieving the objects, isn't it? Then the next one, which we can say that alignment with goals. So here also we can talk about the key consideration. Does it align with the organization or individual's care objectives? If that's so, then why it matters? We can say that a solution that you know deviates from long-term goals, that can derail progress and that can create conflicts. Then how to apply that? When we talk about how to apply that, we can say that we need to identify the primary objective of the organization or individual. Second, we need to ensure the we can say solution contribute to the objective without creating additional conflict. Let's say that when we talk about this alignment with goals, we need to take an example. Like you can say a company's goal to be customer centric, that should influence, you can say that decisions involving customer grievances. Now, let's see that we need to applying to the, you can say that logical framework, right? So here we find out the scenario example that called as a company must decide A company must decide what? Must decide whether to reduce production goals or production cost by outsourcing to a supplier known for what? Known for unethical labor practices. Right. What did we find out here? A company must decide whether to reduce production cost by outsourcing to a supplier known for unethical labor practice. So here the options we can find out that what? The first one, outsource to save cost. Second, it's called as a negotiate. Negotiate with a supplier that follows ethical practices but charges more. Third, we need to think of the third one, which is stated invest in automation to reduce uh, cost over time. And the fourth one, retain the current setup despite high cost, right? So when we evaluate, right, then what we need to do, we need to follow the evaluation using the logical framework. In evaluation using the logical framework, what we can find out, we find out, you can see that a table is given with what? Um, you can find out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 column, and also we can find out that um, 5 of the criterion are given, isn't it? So the first one, it's called as ethics. The second one, stakeholder impact, and the third one is called as a practicality, sustainability, and alignment with goals. When we talk about ethics, so if you look at the option one, what does the option one point out? Outsource to save cost, right? Now, in this case, we can see that it violates ethics. Why? Because you stated that um, outsource to what? Save cost. In option one, do you find out ethics is present? So then, if you talk about the second one, negotiate with a supplier that charges more, right? So which is nothing but negative for society. Then in that case, we can say that stakeholder impact. Stakeholder impact is negative for society. Third, invest in automation to reduce cost. Now, in this case, if I talk about sustainability, we can say that it's a short-term gain only, right? Then the fourth one, alignment with goals, right? So the first one, we can find out ethics, right, which is nothing but violating. In mm, If we talk about the first one, where the stakeholder impact is nothing but negative for society, when we say outsource to save cost, then practicality, we can find out feasible but risky, right? Then sustainability, we can say that short-term gains only. And when we talk about alignment with the goals, we can say that misaligned in the option one only. If I talk about option two, negotiate with the supplier, that you can say that what we can say, mm, negotiate with a supplier that follows ethical practices but charges more. If I look into the first part, which is called as ethics, so in option two, we find out it aligns with ethics, negotiate with a supplier, right? So second is called as what? If I talk about stakeholders impact, so when you say negotiate with a supplier that follows ethical practices but charges more, so you can say that it can be positive for all stakeholders. Then third, we can say that what practicality, so it is possible. Then if I talk about sustainability, we can say that long-term goals, right? Then if I talk about alignment with goals, then we can say that what? Aligned, isn't it? Now, at the same time, if I go to the third option say invest in automation to reduce cost, right, over time. Now, in that case, ethics, we can find out neutral, right? So, because invest in automation to reduce cost over means a time. In ethics, we can find out that neutral. Then, if I talk about stakeholder impact, I can say that mixed or costly upfront. If I talk about practicality, then I can say that long-term feasibility possible, right? So if I talk about short-term gains only, so I can say that unsustainable. If I talk about means alignment with goals, so I can say that it's aligned, right? Now just go to the fourth one. What do you find out that? Retain the current setup despite what? Retain the current setup despite high cost. Now in this case also here you would find out um, the ethics would be what? Aligns with ethics, right? Second is called as a stakeholder impact. I can say that positive internally. So if I talk about practicality, I can say that costly and inefficient, right? If I talk about sustainability, then we can say that unsustainable. Then if I talk about alignment with goals, so I can say that practically aligned, right? Now in this case, here you can observe that option 2 and you can also say that option 3, right? They these both or these two statements offer nothing but an ethical and sustainable solution while aligning with what? Organizational goals, isn't it? Now, in this case, what we can find out here, negotiate with a supplier that follows nothing but you can say that follows ethical practices but charges more. So we can find out option 2 follows that. Then option 3 stated invest in automation to reduce cost over time, right? So in that case, we can say means option 2 and or option 3, right, as both offer nothing but a critical and sustainable solutions while aligning with the organizational goal, right? Now, uh, because that is what you can find out in option 2 and option 3. Right. Option 2 is stated about aligned with ethics. Second is called as a positive for all stakeholders. Third is called as a possible. Right. Fourth one is called as a long-term pain, long-term gains. And fourth one is called as when we say alignment with goals, I can say that aligned. Similar to that, in option 3, we also say that neutral. We also say that mixed or costly upfront. Then third one is called as a long-term feasibility. Then the fourth one is called as a aligned, isn't it? So in that case, we can consider option 2 or 3 could be considered as a appropriate course of action or called as a appropriate means a decision that can be taken, right? Now, if I talk about that, what are the things that generally consider as a pitfalls and how to avoid those common pitfalls? So when we talk about common pitfalls, we find out that the pitfalls like what or pitfalls like what? The first one is called as overlooking stakeholders, right? You must ensure all relevant parties are considered, isn't it? So that's why that is called as one of the pitfalls. Second one is called as emotional bias. When we talk about emotional bias, we can say we need to keep personal emotions and also we need to prefer. Uh, so preferences aside, right? So our judgment must not be means on the basis of what we think. So quick judgment is called as another pitfalls, like avoid rushing into conclusions without evaluating all options can be called as one of the common pitfalls. Then the fourth one is called as a misinterpretation of data. So on the basis of the decisions or the decisions, only on the information provided in the case cannot be called as a means appropriate one. So that is again called as a one of the common means pitfalls, isn't it? Now, when we go for the chat decision making questions, right, we need to understand that how to avoid those of the common pitfalls in chat decision making questions, right? Because to maximize your score in decision making section, so it is crucial to what? Avoid errors that can lead to what? That can lead to, you can say that based or um, incomplete, you can say that evaluation, right? So how to overcome those of the things, right? The first thing is called as overlooking stakeholders. Like when we talk about overlooking stakeholders, so the pitfall is what? Ignoring or underestimating the concern of all parties impacting or impacted by the decision that can lead to a solution that is biased or incomplete. Why it happens? We can say that we focus on the more visible or vocal stakeholders. That's why it happens. Second is called as a second is called as a failure to think about secondary or long-term impacts. Right. So that also will be the reason for the sake of what the pitfalls. Then if I talk about the next one, means how to avoid them. So we need to focus couple of things when we talk about how to avoid. Then please do understand that when we talk about how to avoid it, so we need to think of all stakeholders, all stakeholders. Then second one is called as you need to map, right? You need to map all stakeholders. Second is called as you need to weigh impact, right? Impact, weigh impact. Then the third one is called as what? Ex means you think of any of the example where this particular means statement can be relevant or related. Let's talk about that. If I talk about in a case about closing of factory, consider not just the employee but also the local community and suppliers who depend on it. So, in a case about a closing of what? Closing of factory, right? So, what we can make here, we need to think of emotional bias. We need to think of emotional bias. We need to think of emotional bias that also come the pitfall, like allowing personal emotions, options, or biases influence what one's decision making, right? So that is nothing but the pitfall, right? The second one we can say why it happens, why we why we get emotion or emotional, opinion based, or bias. Because emotional attachment to a specific stakeholder group can also consider that the pitfall, right? You are unable to take proper decision. Second is called as a preconceived notions about the right solution. Preconceived notion means you always carry a kind of a means idea in your mind, right? That which one is the right solution. So in that case, these are the two you can say that emotional bias pitfalls. Like one is called as emotional attachment to a specific stakeholder group. Second is called as a preconceived notion about the right solution. Then how to avoid them? Now, in that case, you need to stay objective, stay objective, stay objective. So when we talk about stay objective, it means focus on the facts presented in the case. Second is called as you need to use logic. You need to assess options that based on what? That based on, you can say that miserable outcomes rather than feelings, right? Then your job is also ask important questions. That is this decision fair to all stakeholders? You need to ask yourself. Second, does it align with ethical and organizational goals? Right. Let's say that if a case involves nothing but a personal conflict between two employers, avoid siding with one based on their background story. Right. So your job is to evaluate their actions and the imp- implications objectively, isn't it? So that's what is nothing but a emotional bias. The next one is called as a quick judgment. So when we talk about quick judgment, we talk about the pitfall, why it happens, and how to avoid. Like in the kind of a idea called as a quick judgment. So the pitfall is what? Jumping to a conclusion, right? Jumping to a conclusion without thoroughly analyzing all aspects of what? On all aspects of the problem or all available options. Why? Why does it need? So we can say that pressure to finish quickly in a real time or real limited exam. So we also say that suspected reading of the case study. Then how we can avoid it? So if you ask me that how to avoid that, so I can say that what you need to adopt a systematic approach. So you need to follow structured steps like identifying the core issue, analyzing stakeholders, and evaluating options, right? And your job is to nothing but a double check I details before you mark an answer. Ensure all the facts and consequences that have been considered, right? So in that case, you can find out the quick judgment can be means can be taken under control, right? Let me give you an example in a business scenario about cost cutting. So don't immediately select the option with the highest short-term savings, right? Consider nothing but a long-term consequences that like employee moral, right? And also you talk about what? Um, you can talk about employee moral, or you can say brand reputation, isn't it? So that is also there. Then just a minute. Yeah. The next one we can find out that misinterpretation of data. So here also we find out the another one. So which is nothing but considering the pitfall, misunderstanding the or misinterpretation of data. Like the pitfall, you can find out drawing incorrect conclusion from the data provided or introducing nothing but assumption not mentioned in the case. And why it happens so? Because misreading numerical data, fact, or stakeholder concerns. We also depend on personal knowledge or external information instead of case specification. Then how to avoid that? Now you need to stick. You need to stick to the what? Stick to the case. Base your decision solely on the information provided. Avoid assumption that are not you can say that are not logically implied, right? Then how to avoid that? Now stick to the case. You need to base your decision solely on the information provided. Avoid assumptions that are not publicly stated or logically. Let's say that if we talk about an example, in a case about what? financial projection. Don't assume trends that are not explicitly outlined. Work with the data as ever it is given, isn't it? Okay. So let's talk about one of the example.